Hello, and welcome to our webinar, The Modern Enterprise, Driving Growth and Efficiency with Value Stream Management and viax. I'm Brian Deal. I'll be hosting the webinar, and I lead the industry strategy at viax. I spent 18 years kind of in manufacturing, really as a practitioner, the last 10 on the software side, both with SAP and viax. So, as you know, businesses today face increasing demands. Streamline operations, boost your agility, deliver seamless customer experiences, all of course, while trying to save money. Today, we want to talk about how combining value stream management and the advanced capabilities of viax can really help companies drive to two new levels of efficiency and growth. So we'll share some insights as well from Wiley on how they've transformed many of their processes, increasing customer satisfaction, standardizing their technology, all in the process. So this webinar, we want to dedicate it. This is for the practitioner, right? These are the unsung heroes out there making it happen every day. They live in the engine room, right? Facing the challenges head on. Where reality is not always logic, but day in and day out, they are the glue that hold organizations together. So our hope today is really that you come away with some good ideas, some actionable concepts that you can take as you work towards really modernizing your enterprise. So let's dive in and introduce our guests. Starting up, we got Joe Cicman from Forrester, Principal Analyst. Joe, a seasoned commerce veteran, going back to the 90s, his days at Sterling and then IBM. Joe is a digital transformation expert. He is helping companies every day, driving efficiency and finding operations. We really like Joe, despite the fact Joe went to Ohio State. So that's nobody's perfect, Joe. Just nobody's perfect. Or should I say the Ohio State? Yeah. So also joined by Brendan Gualdoni, who heads digital commerce and platforms at Wiley, Michigan Stater, by the way. He's a seasoned digital transformation expert, again, focused on driving efficiency. Brendan has extensive experience in retail, going back to Sears, most recently Express, before joining Wiley, where he's now really driving a lot of their transformation efforts across their commerce properties. Finally, we have Larry Ramponi, a 20-year expert in 20 years of experience, also an expert in from cutting code to two startups. He's the founder and CEO of viax. He and the team at viax, me included, are focused on really helping enterprises transform their complexity, their sophistication into competitive advantage through our event-driven process engine. So
I'd say, Brian, as a note, you can tell we've been in this space a little long. We're a lot less gray in these pictures than we are now.
That's true. That's true. I actually updated mine. Tried to. My wife's like, yeah. Very good. So we've got a packed agenda today. We're going to kick things off with an overview by Joe of value stream management and the increasing role it's playing as companies help and work towards transformation. Next, we're going to dive with Larry right into viax and really show the parallels and how viax and value stream are well aligned, and the four foundational elements or capabilities in viax that help drive these types of transformation efforts. Brendan's going to share some real world insights into his experience at Wiley. Some of the lessons learned, he's applying kind of both sides of this. He's looking at it from the process side. He's driving technology. He's leveraging viax, right? And we're going to wrap up by doing an old school fireside chat. So we'll throw some questions out to the guys and hopefully get a great discussion going. So with that, Joe, I want to hand it over to you. I'll roll the slides for you, and we'll dig into value stream management.
All right, thanks, Brian. Let's give it one more click. It can feel like you're on the wrong side of Moore's law. Your workload increases, your budget decreases, and the path to efficiency isn't clear, but there's hope. When you apply the principles of value stream management solutions, you can use AI to help you identify optimizations that increase your capacity and even lower your unit cost. Now, this isn't science fiction. It's currently optimizing software development teams and other domain-specific applications. They just don't call them value streams. You likely call them your end-to-end processes. Now, the challenge of optimizing your value streams is more complex than you can imagine just with your own eyes. And that's why you need technology to help you spot bottlenecks. So today I'm going to give you a peek into why you want to look at the problem through the lens of value streams. We're going to talk about how B2B commerce fits into your end-to-end processes, and specifically about complex products. I'm talking ones that require coordinated marketing, sales, fulfillment, service, even finance. And those end-to-end cross-functional activities can be seen as a value stream. Now, ERPs often pitch themselves as the place to do all that work, but they aren't always adaptive. And their approach certainly puts the system in the middle and the people in the process force fit around it. If it doesn't fit, you end up getting workarounds that emerge. But there is a better way to have apps that fit teamwork better and that remain unified and adaptive. And well, how can you optimize this in your own business? Our research reveals an approach that is yielding success. When your processes are codified in low code and connected to analytics, you can see how your end-to-end processes are actually working. Then you can simulate and test your optimizations. Now, our research has revealed a common architectural pattern that we see occurring across many applications. The applications aggregate telemetry from multiple distinct systems that play a part in the end-to-end process. Now, visualizing your end-to-end processes is a means to an end. When it's codified in process modeling software connected to analytics, you can observe bottlenecks as it runs. And you can think of this as spotting pileups of work in process. With technology, this approach gives you an actionable view of your operations that serve customers. It shows you how work cuts across functional areas of your business and the applications that they use. And when you look at all these departments' activities from a single view, you can see all the relationships, all the handoffs, and all the dependencies. It's like your view of a chessboard. And the way you know you're on track is to monitor the flow of your end-to-end processes. What you have here is a concept of a single pane of glass overlaid on top of your actual value stream that's being rendered for you based on the telemetry, that instrumentation that's being thrown from the processes. These value stream management solutions connect into the back end of all your individual apps and systems of automation. They then allow you to digitize each step in the value stream. That single pane of glass allows you to spot the bottlenecks and trace back to the root cause. Then you can apply an adjustment to that bottleneck and observe the improvement. You can actually watch the flow of value through the system. And that's why we talk about value streams, because it focuses your attention on the value created by each step. And you manage the collection of steps to optimize the flow of value. Then you apply principles of continuous improvement to gradually eliminate whatever bottlenecks are going to emerge. Now, this isn't a project, it's an ongoing program. These value stream management tools gather the data they aggregated and they perform analysis, and some have AI capabilities to show you where the bottlenecks will be during what-if simulations. They can even help you understand the number of resources the value stream is consuming. Some of them connect into your human resource systems and tell you how much each of these value streams is costing you on a regular basis. Too often people think about value streams and they think about, well, it's a one-time process where they get up on a whiteboard, they put up a bunch of sticky notes, and what they end up producing is a static map. But this, on the other hand, is a living, breathing, digitized flow of your digital value stream. And and it can help you refine it and fine tune it. It can help you manage it and help you monitor it. It lets you make those types of decisions so that you can find and eliminate where your waste is. That's just too difficult to do without tooling. Now, earlier, I mentioned that this approach is being used to optimize software development teams, but the approach is similar across many other application domains. Now, this is a screen capture of a value stream management solution, and what you're looking at is a product which is integrated into the software development lifecycle. Now, instead of showing the typical software productivity metrics that most devs consider, this tool uses lean concepts such as flow load and flow velocity to measure your team's performance across various work item classifications. These types of visualizations can help product planners and development leaders determine if the work being performed is matching the intended business priorities. Now, you can do this with other workflows in your organization. You can do this with other workflows around your B2B commerce operations. Again, having that bird's eye view enables you to determine if the work that is actually being performed is matching your intended business priorities. Now, how to bridge between the work that's actually happening on the ground and the work that your business strategy demands. Matching the intended business priorities is a key concept here. Instrumenting the steps in your end-to-end processes isn't something you want to do in a departmental silo. You also don't want to try to optimize your investments in a departmental silo. In fact, when this is done successfully, it's very clearly connected to the strategy that all your stakeholders are focused on. So let's talk about that. In terms of alignment and getting yourself aligned around a North Star, your strategy defines customer interactions, some of which are going to be pure digital interactions, some of which are going to be digitally enabled human interactions. Now, that first step on the left, that's your customer journey map. And you should always start with your customer journey map and then identify the digital interactions in the journey. In that second step, you're going to stack rank those digital interactions by business impact. And the business impact of the interactions is going to be measured by two factors. The first is the benefit to the customers, and second is going to be the value to your firm. And then in that third step, you define the roadmap to deliver those stack ranked digital interactions. And you're going to take a two-pronged approach. So first, you're going to build some quick hits, which are going to validate the value proposition of the interaction. And if it's taken up, then second, you're going to rebuild what's proven to work and make that a global platform level capability. Now, when you link all this together, okay, you end up funding the unified strategy, not a mixed bag of feature enhancements. And then you can optimize all of those capabilities as they work together as cogs in a big machine. Now, when you link all this together, everyone in the organization knows the why behind the work they're doing. And that's because everything's linked back to the customer journey that brings the strategy to life. Now, let's descend a little bit in altitude, and we're going to show the linkage between the customer journey map and the technology that enables it. And we're talking artifacts here. You can imagine a customer journey map as the customer's workflow. Envision it as their jobs to be done. You can also imagine the workflows within your enterprise that support the customer's workflow. Now, what connects them to the development work that you're going to have to do are these things called ecosystem maps. These are maps of all the technology systems in your enterprise. That's the artifact that bridges between the customer experience team that writes the briefs and the enterprise architecture team that writes the code. The ecosystem maps codify the alignment you want. Now let's descend one step lower in altitude and see what these artifacts actually look like. So this one comes from our CX research. It was originally produced by Capgemini for one of their clients. This diagram is obviously dense, so make sure to get your hands on this presentation. Now, the top two rows are the customer journey and the employee journey. And then below that are the layers of the ecosystem. So one layer is the business capabilities and processes. The next is the applications and integrations, and the data and information management layer. And then finally, the opportunities and pain points. Now, our CX analysts are emphatic about never doing a customer journey map without an ecosystem map. And that's because the ecosystem map is how you link technology investments to what you need to support the customer and the employee journeys. Now, I've been talking to you about value streams, but yes, again, you probably don't use that term. You probably call them your end-to-end processes. Whatever you call them, it's important that you approach them with the mindset of managing them like products, with owners. And doing so is going to establish the conditions for continuous improvement, which is what you want, because let's face it, you're probably not going to get it right perfect the first time. And even if you do, customers are going to change, and you're going to have to adapt to keep up with them. Okay, so that's an overview of some upcoming research into optimizing the complex end-to-end processes that support selling complex products to businesses, and how you should keep all of your investments aligned with the strategy that your stakeholders have front of mind. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Brian.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. I mean, the buzzword bingo in terms of, in a good way, unified strategies. The idea of having value, and I think we're just maturing overall, right? The value to not only the customer, but to the business. Everything around being holistic, cross functions, a lot of great things. When I see and I look at, I'm going to go back a slide here to this. I think about, we talk about the front end and the back end. Be like, oh, it's just integration. There's so much more than integration that kind of connects these two universes, literally, right? They're on such different missions, different objectives, and they serve different roles in the organizations. So it's really interesting. I think it's a lot of what you talk about. Larry, I don't know if you're an expert already in this, but these themes kind of stick out because it's a lot of what we talk about when we're trying, when we're thinking about viax and what we're trying to do, right?
Yeah, and what was going through my head as Joe was doing his presentation was there's almost these two paths converging together, right? And there wasn't this grandiose plan where, hey, we're going to build software based on Joe's research or vice versa. It's just acknowledgement in the market that something has to change, right? And unless that something changes, we're going to continue down the same path and realize these non-efficiencies, right? The very risky return on investments. Very well aligned, I think, between the two, either the platform and what Joe sees as value stream mappings. Absolutely.
Yeah, you almost have to bridge between the two worlds. You've got sort of this process methodology, and then you need, with the ecosystem maps and things Joe talked about, you need technology to help kind of connect the dots, right?
Right.
With that, why don't you, again, maybe talk us through, I think you're already starting to, is sort of the problems that you saw in what motivated you to found viax, and sort of foundationally, I think there's some core elements within viax that really line up well with value stream mapping.
Yeah, and I think with the process engine and the value stream mapping, it actually aligns more naturally to how B2B businesses operate, right? Where we're in this kind of paradigm where everything is built to a point solution, right? What we would expect out of maybe a commerce system, an ERP system, or whatever it is, without ever taking into account that entire end-to-end process, right? And that's really the goal of viax here, and why we call it the process engine. We kicked around a number of terms. It was has definitely a lengthy journey on its own to come up to land on this idea of the process engine. But essentially, and you see our tagline here, the goal is to drive growth and efficiency without compromise, and we'll get into that, what we mean by that, by powering commerce, portals, and digital operations, right? These end-to-end processes, these transactional processes where you have parties interacting over workflows, different transaction types. These are the things that we want to be able to enable. So we could hop to the next slide here, Brian. So we'll start with a quote from one of our greatest clients, and the company that Brendan works at, Wiley. This is Ref Madden, the Chief Technology Officer there. And what he says is, any business in its purest form is a collection of processes, and successful businesses find a way to run these processes efficiently. And this is exactly how we see the world at Viax, right? Currently, in the current state, most of the focus is on the ends of these processes, right? The front end solutions, the CX, the other side of the coin, where we're looking at the ERP systems, the legacy systems. Very few cycles are spent on how these processes come together. How did the operational data get unified across these processes? What are the capabilities we want to expose? What are the systems we need to integrate or unify? And when we start to think about our processes or our solutions, right, in these terms, we can start to serve any channel with any data, any capability to any persona, party, whatever it is we want. So we kind of knock down borders in that area. So the overall problem statement as we see it is very simple, is the B2B enterprise is underserved. There are very few players in the market trying to address it. Most of the big names everyone's familiar with. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's a very complex area. And unless you've sat in the seats to really see the daily challenges that our customers face, it's hard to build solutions to address those. A lot of clients are constantly in maintenance mode. There's very little room for innovation, just because of the systems and the paradigms that are available to them. And getting to the kind of the broken paradigms here. And in Joe's slide, you can see all the areas of the organization that these end-to-end processes touch. So any change within these systems, data, whatever it is, reverberates throughout the organization. So it's a difficult market to serve, and a number of issues that we see currently. So how do we know it's underserved? And remember the CDs, the 1995 greatest hits now, and they like to joke that these problems 10 years ago. And the non-funny part is these will continue to be the problems, because unless we change, unless we start thinking about these things differently, we'll continue to suffer through the same exact problems. Some of those being things like complex products, pricing, channels. Delivering any type of performant real-time pricing unified across your different channels, maybe you have multiple systems, is really, really challenging. Any type of inventory and availability. Anytime we talk to a client about this is one of those areas where their head goes down on the desk, right? Operational scalability and innovation. Expanding new capabilities typically means new licenses, new expertise, maybe from your SI and another bill. System integration and architectural challenges. A lot of times there are kind of business logic that may have been created 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and the guy who wrote it's no longer there, and it gets duplicated in other systems, and tech that just continues to grow across these platforms because we're not looking at these things as a total end-to-end process. And then, of course, organizations and most of the organizations we speak to have grown through M&A, and that just multiplies these challenges exponentially. So you go from 5, 10 ERP systems, and we talk to clients that have 100 ERP systems. You can imagine the challenges of data synchronization, migration. What are the capabilities? Now you've inherited another 2 configurator systems, right? Like how do we provide a single unified view across all those? And we love this quote, right? And it kind of speaks to, I think, the heart of what we're getting at here, that, change has to happen. Is the greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence, but to act with yesterday's logic. So we'll hop into introducing Viax here. And, what we're saying is the first purpose-built engine to unify end-to-end processes for the B2B enterprise. And when we talk about processes, it could be a quote, it could be that generates a sales order, that generates a subscription contract. It could be a commerce order that unifies 10 different commerce systems, or that end-to-end process you just don't have a name for that's really specific to your business. But when we talk about unification, it's across these processes that we want to be able to unify these categories here, the data, capabilities, and systems, and really break down the boundaries of who it is you're serving, right? So no longer do we have to struggle, providing a really complex configuration to a commerce system, right? Those are things we should be able to do with the availability, with the really complex pricing. Let's hop to the next slide here, Brian. So these are really the four tenets of the platform, the process engine itself. And, we consider this the holistic approach to B2B. You can, find maybe systems, point solutions that are addressing one of these or part one of these, but unless you're addressing all of these, you don't have a unified, holistic approach to addressing the end-to-end problems. And we'd go as far as to say there's very few end-to-end solutions that we couldn't cover with this. And just quickly here, a really comprehensive B2B data model. A lot of data models that are provided out of systems are more retail B2C focused. A lot of work goes into extending those, making them, fit your business. But out of the box, we've built those things. They're really complex pricing structures, configuration models for products, BOMs, whether sales solution, manufacturing BOMs, guided selling, all those things included with right within the platform. Services that are built for B2B or enterprise level grade services. A lot of systems will provide out of the box, a number of microservices, and it's kind of up to the client to decide how to compose that customer journey, right? We take a little bit of a different approach where we have some core services that execute models that all follow the same pattern. So for example, our pricing, commissions, product restrictions all follow the same pattern. So they execute within the same system, same service. And if there's a model that we don't support, you could use our platform as a rapid development platform and develop that model on your own. A purpose-built architecture, full knowing that we need to play well with others. We're going to help facilitate this end-to-end process where a lot of point solutions kind of take the approach of, not my problem. Maybe you'll fix it with integration, or they've built these ESB layers. These organizations do not want to become or shouldn't become tech organizations, right? There's a level of development that should be expected, but not necessarily go beyond that. And then the last part here, this idea of this business interaction modeler, kind of getting to the heart of the process. So you can think of a business interaction as a quote, a sales order, anything where you have parties interacting over transaction types, over a workflow, there's capabilities and data. We want to give you the ability to model these interactions versus coming out of the box with something that you're kind of confined to. Model the workflow to how you see fit, what data you needed along that interaction, what capabilities you want to expose into who. And that gets to that uncompromised word that we saw in the beginning. We don't want to make any hardline statements on how exactly you should do something. We want to build the tools that allow you to build your offerings. Just real quickly looking at the interaction modeler, and this is a very, very simple example here. You can model out your workflow, your steps. You see here, active, going to completed or rejected. In between those steps, you can execute a series of actions. Maybe you're integrating with a particular ERP system. Maybe you want to check inventory. You want to shoot off an email. There are also events. viax is an event-driven architecture that you can tie, some of these models to. So, for example, you add a new product. Maybe you need to redetermine pricing. Maybe you need to redetermine the sales team that's on that order because a new product family has been added to that, right? So, a very prescriptive way of how to model out these interactions and also how to extend the system versus traditionally where you're almost at the mercy of the developer and their experience within that platform. And then, of course, because you can model all of these interactions in a single platform, and again, we don't have to be the entire process. We can be, step 3, 4, 5, 6, but help facilitate that entire process and give an overview of it. But of the interactions that are running within our system, you get all the metrics on how those interactions are operating. And it really helps our customers operate more efficiently, be very much more proactive. So overall, how is my interaction operating? So, in the past 3 months, it's gone from draft to in progress, and it's taken, a day or whatever it is, right? And in between that transition, here are the steps that have been executing. So again, a much more effective way for businesses to be proactive and operate more efficiently. I think that might be the last one there, bro.
Yeah, no, that's great, Larry. And Joe, I'm sure you're seeing some commonality there, especially this last piece with the interactions. And I think part of this, and especially with this slide, is that idea of continuous, right? You're kind of looking at it, you're evaluating what has changed, what do we have to adjust. I think it really fits nicely well with the value stream approach.
And what aligns well, not to hop in, sorry guys.
No.
Is that not only do we build the software around this idea of these business interactions, but it's the heart of our workshops, right? So not only do we provide the platform, but we want to give our customers kind of a jump start, kind of best process. And we iterate over these workshops every 2 months, and they take about a couple hours a day. And we use the business interaction as the buckets of requirements that we gather. So, to Joe's point on these value stream mappings and what's going to drive the most business value and maybe the least amount of time, these are the sessions where you can really hone in on these things. There's a structured kind of approach to it. Your business team, your tech team, your partners are all in and involved in this, and all speaking the same language. There's events that happen. What does this workflow look like? What are the data? So there's predefined buckets that we use to execute these workshops and help facilitate a much more efficient process.
That's great. Thank you, Larry. Want to get Brendan into the mix here. So, Brendan, you've been at the center of all this for 20 plus years, kind of juggling kind of all the variables, all the stuff in terms of with that front row seat, this evolution of, from the earliest days till now. From your perspective, what have you observed? What key changes have you seen throughout your career here? I think it's always good to kind of get a perspective, as we're moving forward, is to look back and appreciate sort of how we've been going.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Before I answer that, let me just give a brief overview of Wiley.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're a 200-year-old publishing company. I mean, in some of Larry's slides that we resonate with.
I saw some smiles. Some legacy platforms.
We've been around before the internet. We've been on the stock market, the New York Stock Exchange, since the early 60s. So, and I guarantee, any professional has one of our books in their library or has read one of them. We also own dummies.com, which is another big portion of it. And from that heritage, we've grown through acquisition, and our biggest, player in space of research is B2B, and that's with the majority of our businesses, which is complex. Research is very complex. It's not about just selling books anymore. It's about, we're switching to a knowledge-based economy, and Wiley is poised to be that, curator of the knowledge for, the next century. Hopefully we'll be around for another 100 years. But just talking about B2B in general, I mean, I've seen it from, the traditional sales operations where it's very face-to-face, customer-focused, phone calls, fax machines, everything. And then, this whole idea of the internet showed up, and every B2B customer was like, hey, can I just see your catalog online? Which, hey, that's easy. Let's show some pictures of it. But what gets difficult with B2B is there isn't a one-size-fits-all. There isn't a small, medium, and large like there is in retail. And when you're talking about different constraints with B2B, if it's in manufacturing or if it's in the service industry, what's going to drive the cost and the complexity, it goes into the price. And getting to that how much does this thing cost, then it becomes a handoff back to the sales team, meetings, SOWs, which drives cycles and potentially some frustration. And a lot of the modern e-commerce systems can't handle that complexity. They might have the ability to hold the attribution, but can they actually scale to calculate a quote? And then at the end of the day, if you do get a quote, can I reverse that quote back into the system to say, like, What if I have to return something? How much did that one item cost, or that one piece of customization to my product, cost me? Can I return it? And then, going just, one step further is in that e-commerce process to make everything more digital is let's say you do get to a price and a quote, it's how do you pay for it? Everyone thinks of e-commerce is really about, digital wallets and credit cards and payments. That's true. But the reality of it is a lot of commerce, runs on that's on B2B is still through invoicing and ACH transactions, or if you're in Europe, the SERP banking system. So it's really different and complex. And one of the things that I've seen that's made things just difficult for companies to transition to a digital focus or to put the customer first. I mean, that journey map is great, and I've seen in Joe's slide, that first level, that first swim lane, I've seen a lot of them in retail, because it is about the customer experience. But then that next level down is, okay, how do I get is the internal process of the business related to that customer experience? What's my internal customer experience process, which at a lot of B2B companies, it's usually driven out of the ERP, which is governed by financial regulations and laws, which isn't sexy at all and doesn't really translate, directly to an e-commerce system when you're selling something that's a physical product or a commoditized product. So you see things just fall out from there. I mean, just one example that I've seen is like, hey, here's a company, they're great, they're making a ton of money, they're B2B, they have their catalog online. Well, when you go to add to cart and you finally get the things that you want in your cart, instead of paying for or calculating your tax or figuring out what your shipping is or adding any customizations, you're presented with a form, which, you get into marketing automation, and it's just like, it's leaving a voicemail for somebody on the other end, and will they get back to me? And then you have that drop off, and then that, cycle of waiting continues.
And that person on the phone is doing the configuration in an Excel spreadsheet, right? With the pricing and the,
yeah. It's amazing how much business is really done still in Excel.
Right. And I put this slide up here because I think this is on top of everything you spoke to, is you've got this juggling act, and it's a living contradiction, right? You're trying to save, you're trying to drive and grow and evolve these processes, like you just mentioned, with transformation. It's a juggling act where you've got 1 foot in the past, 1 foot in the future. Budgets are kind of spreading, never where you necessarily want them all to go. And you got to place bets, right? And you've got to sort of figure out what has the most value, kind of tying back to value stream mapping, what's going to have the most impact. Throughout this, I'm sure you have some lessons learned. Wiley's doing a great job with their overall transformation. How have you avoided some of the pitfalls, or even helped shift the approach or the thinking at Wiley? Whether that's, from a technology side or just in general, like what are you seeing there?
So one of the things is really embracing, SaaS platforms, platforms that are, API first or flexible or headless, you can plug into in different places. And instead of, I've purchased software where it's like, okay, I need that version. Okay, here's my tolerances for servers. Then I have to go through the capital expenditure, and it's moving from that CapEx model to an OpEx model. But then what's refreshing with software like what we found with Viax is, it's a buffet. It's one price. If I only need just basic e-commerce functionality, cart pricing, that's great, and I don't have to go to the other side of the salad bar. But what I found is because we have those tools in our toolbox, I'm seeing where it can solve other problems, and we've actually done that, and taken the idea of the process as Larry described and put it in front of the business, and to say, hey, let's walk through this just to see what it would look like, and realizing that at the end of the day, it's like, oh, we can use that in a couple different places. It's not just for direct-to-consumer e-commerce. Oh, it's not just for this line of business, or an integration into OMS, we can do a lot more things with it. And that's where I've seen the idea of, how do we save money or do more with less? My favorite term from my boss is, hey, let's reuse the software. And it's going from not doing a full-blown ERP and gathering our requirements or figuring out if we have to buy versus build. Let's just take what we currently have and let's do a proof of concept. Let's get, that 80-20 rule. Let's just get something moving. And usually, showing people that you can A, move quickly, B, execute on real code in usually in production or an environment that is shared with production is really powerful.
No doubt. And I think, when I think about it, and another slide I dedicate to you in terms of, the challenges you have within the org and in every org, right? It's not specific, but, Larry was talking about knocking down borders. I think you've done a great job kind of building on that idea of, let's talk about what's in common versus what's unique. Maybe speak more about that. We talk, it's B2B versus B2B to C. It's D to C. Like all these elements, the patterns underneath it. Like I think you've had a lot of success there. Maybe speak more about that.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we could get into the B2B, B2C, D to C, B2B to B, or B2B to C. I mean, all of it and in between. At the end of the day, every one of these selling models has the same problem. How do I show the product to the customer? Can I give them a cart where they can add it to the bag? Can they pay for it? Can I send that order to the back office? Can I return it? How do I do customer service? And, some of these systems that are point to point, Larry was talking about, just filling in the box. I need an OMS here. I need integration over there. I need, a CRM here. Well, we have all that and we do, but what's missing is how do you integrate those things and reuse existing software that'll make sense and we'll get value out of it. It's not just, at Wiley, we have a lot of web properties and not all of them are of the same caliber. Some of them are, yes, SaaS. Some of them are purchased from a big vendor. Some of them are homegrown, but each one of those has the same things. They have to be PCI compliant. They need to, split orders because they want to do digital and physical. They want to bundle orders. And it's great to do that in the e-commerce system. It's really easy, but then how do you get it to the back office? How do you recognize that revenue? How do you reconcile the revenue that you're trying to recognize? All those are common problems. And usually what happens is inside the e-commerce that I've seen is they roll it up into one line item. And then it's like a SKU that doesn't exist. And you have to translate the SKU on the back end versus, hey, if you put your product in the product master and set it up, flow it to a system that can actually have line level order management. So what I mean by that is it's not just, hey, this is what I bought and here's how much it costs. It's like, here's what I bought, how much it cost, here's the discount, here's the tax I paid on it. Because the systems behind the scenes, we can use existing systems or software like viax to split up those orders to go into the correct ERP or correct order management system. That's where I've seen a lot of value lately, and that's how we're expanding. I mean, we recently just launched Wiley.com and replaced one of those 1990s e-commerce systems that served us well for many years, but it just didn't grow with us. And we found something new and modern that we like, and we can move faster with it and much cheaper.
Oh, that's fantastic. Let's jump into our fireside chat and get everybody into the game here. Mm-hmm. So yeah, maybe this, and I'll put some questions up here. Maybe this first one to you, Larry, is, from a systems perspective, why do traditional systems kind of struggle in meeting these demands, right? And which kind of exacerbates or leads to organizational paralysis, obviously gaps in capabilities if you're trying to launch new things, but just these legacy style issues.
Yeah, I think overall, getting back to the broken paradigm kind of line, we're asking systems to do things that they were never intended to do, right? So for the most part, front end systems were never intended to really represent the complexities of an enterprise's product, its pricing. It's more of again, B2C kind of retail focused systems or structures. And the ERP system was never intended to be your, alpha and omega of all data, business logic, driving these experiences, right? It's just, it doesn't perform that way. We've tried that 1,000 times, right? So I think the paradigm kind of has to change. It's a broken paradigm and then in between is where the real problems lie and where the real challenges are. And, there's always the start of every project is, how do I get this piece of data to this system? And you can map out the mapping of a project pretty easily, right? It's been pretty consistent over the past, 10, 20 years. Again, I think it's just asking systems to do things that they weren't intended to do and just relying on what we're comfortable with.
No doubt. I think there's Brent, I think there's an organizational dynamic to that, in terms of the hesitation that organizations have. And you've touched on some of this, but, the true overhaul. And I think there's this idea or this trap out there that you have to start from scratch. Like what advice do you have for people or kind of how are you seeing that play out?
Yeah. So, throughout my career, I've seen, the ERPs, you have to move it. And because the integration system was purchased for that ERP, okay, you add that on. And because this other system was specifically bought for that system to accept payments, as an example, okay, we got to include that. And then it becomes like, oh my gosh, this project of, I just want a better user interface, or I want it to run faster. It becomes now a multi-year capital investment. And my answer to that is you don't have to do it all at once. You can take small segments or applications or a business function and you can improve it. You can incrementally improve it. And whether it's taking a, reconciliation engine that was put in place on premise next to an ERP and move it to cloud, that's incremental improvement. And then once you get it into cloud, then you can start using all the, the modern integrations with that and you enhance it. And then once the teams, usually it's the finance team because they're in charge of these things, gets comfortable with it, then they come back and say, hey, we got another problem over here. Can you help us with this one? But you can incrementally do it. And the other trend that I've seen is, do we lift and shift everything, which then becomes this, how do you document something that was built 20 years ago when half the staff that was there is already retired? Or do you try and make it a greenfield and go as simple as possible and encapsulate your core competencies as a company into a different application instead of trying to retrofit it into an accounting system that was never meant to, take subscriptions or complex services or, complex manufactured goods. I've seen it there as well.
It's one of the main reasons we built the process engine, right? This idea of ripping and replacing for customers is such a daunting task. It's just almost paralysis from the get-go. Whereas if now you can place a system in between, right, and not necessarily an ESB system that's kind of just transferring data, but has data structures, that has capabilities, that has parties, that
business logic
that you can model these things out. That decision doesn't have to happen, right? And Brendan mentioned it earlier. It's almost a roadmap to, where we're going to start here, but next we're going to go here, 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 and here, right? Without having to say, okay, here's my point solution, here's the new one. How do these two clash, right?
Yeah, Larry, if I can just piggyback on that one. So we're being head of digital commerce platforms. I'm in a shared service and we run what's called the front office. So CRM systems, e-commerce, payments, MarTech systems. And then there's the traditional back office. It's this idea of we need to build a bridge between two of them. And we refer to, viax as the middle office. It's connected, legacy applications that are making millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to the accounting system without having to change either one of those systems, which is quite unique. And then the other piece of it is, you know, I've seen your team take the process engine in real time, demo it, and then the room will ask a question, well, can it do this? And then your team goes, I don't know, let's try it. And they try it right there in the room without having to have another meeting, a solutions architect coming in or whatever it is. It's just like, hey, we are beyond cloud. We are, you know, on the cusp of a lot of processing power because of whether it's AI or just, you know, the amount of engineers around the world that, hey, let's just see how fast we can do this and let's see if it'll work. And that's the real thing that just brings smiles to a lot of people's faces. Like, did that really just happen? And like, yeah, they just did that in real time, which is nice to see.
And to the point, not to kill this slide here, but we did a POC, right, recently where a permutation of a quote could have 100,000 lines, right? And we're able to render that in seconds. Like, that's the type of performance that you can get with modern systems. You have, you know, millions of pricing records. We're doing sub-second type pricing with that type of stuff. So there's newer, you know, more modern ways, I think, and from an organizational perspective, you got to be open, right? That's the one thing. Wiley's been around a long, long time, but they had the insight, right, enough to say, hey, there's got to be a different way, right? We need to reduce costs. We need to look at different systems, and I give them a lot of credit, right? There's a, you know, fear of change, right, that could be debilitating. You know, and almost like, hey, I don't want to rock the ship, but they saw kind of past some of that there.
Yeah, the other thing too is I've also heard the fear of custom code, but then if you take a step back and like, okay, it really isn't custom code. It's a design pattern. You know, now that, like I keep mentioning, just cloud. It's like, what cloud do you want to use? And I can mention the word serverless, and each cloud has their own implementation of it, but it's still the same code that's running. And that's one of those value adds that I found that got us to market a lot faster and quite honestly saved us a lot of money that we don't have to use our own, you know, instances or, you know, Kubernetes for running another server just for a microservice. It's instantaneous because everything's just so fast now.
Sure.
That is the biggest, you know, we talk about our biggest competition. It's usually custom code, right? It's something that you just don't have the tool set, or you're going to wire together a few different systems. It just lends itself really well to that.
Yeah.
Well, I think that it's perfect because it kind of blurs right into my next question I was going to pose to Joe, because, you know, as commerce is streamlined, and if I look back to my own career, there's probably less in the box now than there was before. And like Wiley, there's some special sauce that they've, you know, and things that they need for their business. You know, net it orphans certain capabilities and functionality. And it feels like a bunch of compromises sometimes where everyone's, you know, we got to go out of the box standard. Like, how do you preserve that unique value, or what are you seeing from customers?
Yeah. You know, back in the day, you had like a JEE app. You would build your own war file, build your own EAR file, and you basically writing code. I mean, you could say that, hey, it's a customization to the e-commerce app, but it's just an app server in a database, and you're writing code within that. And you know, some of them had persistence frameworks, whatever, that you could take advantage of, but in the end, it was custom code. That just architectural paradigm was very difficult, but it was the best at the time. Nowadays, you know, you could have, there's a couple of things. One, some of these platforms will include like a low code layer where you can just visually inspect, and so it's not so much of a burden of having to be able to read code to verify what it's doing. You could actually visually see it. Others just don't even offer that layer, but you can bring your own in whatever language that you're comfortable with, right? So it's not like a proprietary language. But that's that's where you want to do the processes, or call them customizations, that are unique to your business, that you're not going to get out of a platform. Like, you're not going to try to hack or parameterize, a layer from the platform. The trick, however, is governing that in a really effective way, because if you lower the cost of entry for writing customization, you can get some janky code that can cause its own headache.
Sure.
And so there is a lower cost. It is, an agility or low code layer like that. You can have your business analysts write it, people who are familiar with the business, who are process experts. They don't necessarily have to be PhDs in coding, but you do have to do some extra governance, because what you want is someone who's going to write the code and then have stewardship over it. You don't want them to just write something easily and hand it over. You want them to take ownership over it, and over time keep it optimized and refactored, et cetera, et cetera. So that's, I would say that pattern isn't necessarily specific only to commerce systems. Like, there are some CRM systems. There's one in particular that comes to mind that actually, started its life as a BPM, and then it went to like an arbitrary, low code platform. Those things are hard to sell. And so they built some capabilities to do CRM, and then they became this highly flexible CRM system. But when you're in there and you start adapting it for your company, you're like, oh, well, I gotta add a little bit more on the side. Then you realize that you're sitting on a low code platform in its own right. And so that's how some of these other systems have dealt with the fact that you're going to have some out of the box processes, but what you need is flexible tooling to allow process experts to go and do their thing and optimize, and not be beholden to an application vendor that will say, hey, I'm the best practices of process. I mean, a lot of this, when you break it down, what you realize is businesses have to take ownership of the processes that make them great. And then they can become great. They can become differentiated, and they can lessen their dependence on some best practices vendor.
Yeah, and this is coming to a head now, especially with platforms that weren't SaaS to start out with, that are now moving to a SaaS model.
Yep.
You get less functionality, right? You're hearing a lot about clean core and maybe commerce, and on-prem clients are refusing to go to the SaaS model, because where does this exact functionality live, right? Where's the home for this now? And it's almost back to that paradigm where it's like, we'll build another tool for you, to be able to figure that out, or, you could do that. And yes, but this is just becoming more and more of a prevalent issue. Yeah.
If I can just jump in, because Larry, your whole point of like, oh, we were a, installed software on-prem, or, sitting, on top of cloud, not in cloud. And you can tell if some companies have just moved their stuff to SaaS versus being digitally native and born in the cloud, because they have the visual tools, the low code, and in some cases no code that Joe is talking about, that is intuitive. You don't need to train your staff on how to use something. They already know what they're doing. Right. They've done it enough times in whiteboarding or PowerPoint, and it should just feel like, we're putting together a workflow. It should feel like, what is that process and how we're going to get there? That's one of the things I think that differentiates, and that's how I look at some software when I'm evaluating it. Like, that's the maturity model of it, that you can just see inside the product versus having to ask the question of like, what cloud are you on, or pedestrian items like that.
Right.
No doubt. All right, we got two more questions. We'll go rapid fire. I think, Joe, you might be great for this one, which is, what advice, we talked about value stream management. What advice do you have for a company or a team that's looking to take the first steps here and adopt an approach like this?
Yeah, I got three things. The way we frame this for clients is that journey maps and value streams bring relevancy to your tech stack investments, which means that you're going to orient your technology investments around the needs of your customers by viewing their needs holistically, as opposed to making investments with blinders on in one department and just to move the needle in one department. Number two, another thing we talk to clients about is to instrument your processes and use that as feedback to understand what truly is the next most important bottleneck for you to focus on. And so when you have instrumentation across the entire journey or the entire value stream, then you make data-based decisions about where to invest. Too many times I see lists of priorities from technology leaders, and as I ask, well, what's that related to? That's what that's related to. They don't have a view of how it affects the customer. The impact to the customer should be the North Star to prioritize 1, 2, 3. You can only do that if you have a view of that. That's why we say start with the journey map. And then finally, I would say we also talk about creating belief in this approach of letting the process data signals guide your actions. If you are making prioritization decisions about your biggest problem without feedback of your customer's biggest problem, that's no way to run a railroad. And so we encourage clients to start small with one process, instrument it, iteratively improve it, make believers out of yourselves and all of your other stakeholders. And then you can expand the bounds of the process and you can have a much more broad-based impact.
No, that's great. That's great. All right. Final question. Weigh in, guys. I think this is a real interesting one. Everything, if you think about a lot of what we talked about, elevating, standardizing, seeing the commonalities, do you envision or do you see this coming with tools like value stream mapping and viax, where you move beyond commerce and we just view things in its purest form across functions as just digital operations, how we do it? What do you guys say?
Yeah, I think this is the roadmap to digital operations where, it's more channel management versus, point solution to serve a particular channel, where you can view all of these things as one large unit, right? Your organization operating as one large unit.
Yeah, I can jump in on this one too. From a visual standpoint, because everything's online, everything's web, when we've always had this idea of we need a design system because we need to make sure our brand is intact. And there's these strong patterns in the CMO world of you have these patterns and making sure it stays crisp as it gets executed and as they're thinking about it. What the value streams are to me is that's the operational side of what a journey map and that design system can be, but for a business process, because you need that, and you need to know where it's, things are going to be impacted, or making sure that when, that order goes through, the type of it is in this currency of this precision, to make sure you're not going to break some back office system. It should, all the way through be thought through.
Well, that's great. Joe, you got anything?
Yeah, I do. If we were selling oil filters, then that would be really cool. We could chop our systems up really easily. But when we're selling connected oil filters that send telemetry up into the cloud, the life cycle of that oil filter goes well beyond. And so it necessarily is going to blur the boundaries, because you're going to have with connected devices that you continue to work with the vendor throughout the entire life cycle. You got to think differently than I made a sale, I shipped the product, I'm done with it. And that is necessarily going to expand the bounds. And so I think it's the complexification of the products that businesses buy that is going to drive the form factor of the commerce software.
I love it. And I think that's a great maybe topic we can discuss and explore in a future session. I want to thank you guys for joining us today. And I hope for the audience, you've enjoyed the overview of value stream management and learning a little bit more about Viax and how they're changing the game with a process-first approach. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
guys.
See you guys.
Bye.